Okay, so I'm recording now. Welcome back to your Thursday's class. Sorry it's a little late start there. I was just talking to some students from my class I had just before this. Last day we talked about functional groups. So functional groups are compound or not compounds, but I guess like groups or parts of organic molecules that really define how they react. They kind of determine the physical and chemical properties of organic compounds. So remember, organic compounds are made of hydrocarbons, so carbon and hydrogen. But on that compound, we can have what's called functional groups, or groups that kind of change how they behave. So there are alcohols and aldehydes and ketones and carboxylic acids and so many things. And you can see on this slide, if you missed class, I guess last class was Tuesday. If you missed last class, you can see a list of functional groups here. But we only need to know some of these. And I made the joke the other day that you had to memorize all of this. You absolutely do not. I mean, obviously, I want you to know what an alkane, alkene, and alkyne are. Personally, I wouldn't call those functional groups, but they do kind of define the reactivity of a molecule. But what you guys need to know, and I'll do this in purple, are alcohols, aldehydes, ketones, carboxylic acids, and then we had ester and ether, and then we had amine and amide. So there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 different molecules, or eight different functional groups that are important for you all to understand. I'm not going to go through this again because we did this on Tuesday, but what I am going to do, or what we will do today, is practice this. So wink, 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 and anybody who had me last semester knows when I wink, or at least I say wink, this is definitely a test question. We're going to look at some molecules, and we'll identify functional groups on those molecules. So on slide, one second, on slide 28, this is our first example. So yeah, does somebody have a question? It sounds like somebody does.
Yeah, me, Mr.
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but the code is not in the D2L. I couldn't find it. I just joined late because I didn't find it.
You couldn't find what?
The class code.
Well, you're here, so you must have found the class code.
Yeah, someone sent it to me.
Oh, the class codes. Okay, so give me a second. It's the first week, so things can be a little dicey. Is it something we say? Just let me show you. I'll share a screen in a second.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
No problem. So somebody has sent the class code out, which I do definitely appreciate, but the class codes are here. I might do this a little differently than your other instructors. I don't post them the night before or the day before. I post class codes typically about 10 minutes before the class starts. So your class codes, if you go to D2L, they're posted in the news feed. What I highly recommend that you guys do is download an app. It's called Pulse, or Brightspace Pulse. This app will send notifications to your phone when I update the news. I'm circling it like 50 million times here. The news is really where you're going to get a lot of information from me. So for anybody who didn't get the class code, make sure you check your news on the D2L. That's where I post it. Again, I assume since you're here, you somehow have the class code, but check the news. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
sure.
Yeah, thanks. And as Aman said, it's called the Pulse app. Actually, I have it open right here. If you can see my screen, um, I don't know why they call it this. I don't know why they don't call it like D2L. But anyways, the D2L Corporation has an app called Bright Space Pulse. Again, I have no idea why they call it this. It seems a little silly, but this app is fantastic because anytime I post a news item or like I update your notes, it goes in this app. Okay, so anyways, back to the notes. Let me share my screen, or the correct screen, I should say. So what I'm going to do today is, well, we're going to finish this section and get into the next section, but we're going to do this practice problem. And again, if I can draw a winky face here. I don't know if that's a good winky face, but you definitely might see this on a test or your final exam. What I want you to do with these questions is to tell me what functional groups you see on these molecules. And again, there's 8 possible answers here. So you guys can put your answers in on the chat, but I'm just going to write a list. So the possible answers are alcohol, aldehyde, ketone, carboxylic acid, there's ester, there's ether, there's amine, and amide. So especially with the bottom ones here, it can get a little confusing because esters, ethers are very similar. Amines, amides are very similar. All right, so before we even identify the functional groups, I'm going to try to give you some fun facts about all of these chemicals. So we have like benzocaine, capsaicin, aspirin, and vanillin. So benzocaine is a chemical many, many years ago. I guess, gee whiz, I'm 35, so maybe 15, 16 years ago. I made this in a organic chemistry class. So just like you guys, I was in an organic chemistry course learning about functional groups, and I made this chemical. This is a kind of an old organic chemical that dentists would use to numb, like almost like an anesthetic to numb your gums before dental surgery. So benzocaine, if any of you have ever had like a toothache or a pain in your mouth, you can buy a compound or a brand, something like Oragel. And in the olden days, it would have something in it called benzocaine, which would kind of numb, meaning like kill the pain in your gums or your teeth. I don't know if they use it anymore, but it was definitely a chemical used 50, 60 years ago. So in the chat, I only have one answer so far. There's two, arguably three, but there's two answers for this question. And Aman in the chat has the first one. Let's get my highlighter here. Amine is definitely an answer. So for our functional groups, we have this guy on the left and then this guy on the right. And like, this is a good question because a lot of students get confused. A lot of students will say, okay, well, let me, oops, sorry. I didn't mean to do that, sorry. So this is an amine, not an amide. But a lot of students over here on the right would say, and I've seen this on tests like 1,000 times, they'll say, oh, this is a ketone and an ether. But I would not mark you correct. It is not a ketone and an ether because when we put those two together, it forms an ester. Okay, so, this is a little bit weird. It's a little bit of memorization for you, but you must know these 8 functional groups that I have written on the right side of the page. You could, I've had students mention that this was a benzene ring, which is fine. I personally, I don't consider benzenes or alkenes or alkynes functional groups, but I mean, it never hurts to know that this is a benzene ring. But in terms of the functional groups, I'm going to cross out benzene, guys. There are 2. There's an amine and an ester. And for anybody who's sitting there right now thinking, what is going on? Or I don't know any of this, you need to go back and look at your notes. Make sure you review your notes. So you must know these functional groups that I have checked in this list. Okay.
So, sir, do we have to write all of these answers
Yes.
that you write?
Yep. Yeah, like not, you don't have to write these down for class. Like I don't care what you write in class, but if this was a test question, and that's a really good question, by the way, if this was a test question, it would be worth 2 marks. And I would say, identify the functional groups on this compound, and I would have 2 blanks, and you would write amine, and you would write ester.
Oh, okay. I think we have to write all of the list that you write.
No. Yeah, you don't need to write the list. The list is just kind of I don't want to say a cheat sheet, but kind of like the possible answers. So
okay.
yeah. So don't worry about the list. The list is just the possible answers.
Okay, sir.
Cool. Okay, good question. So let's look at another one. Now this has to be easily one of my favorite chemicals ever. I don't know if you guys watch a lot of YouTube, but if you watch the YouTube channel Hot Ones, or I think the YouTube channel is actually from First We Feast, people answer questions as they eat hot wings. And the reason food tastes hot or burns your mouth. So if you think a lot of like Middle Eastern or Asian dishes that are spicy, I don't know a lot of Middle Eastern dishes that are spicy, but I know in like Asian cuisine, there's a lot of spicy food. It's because of capsaicin. This is a chemical in usually peppers. So, jalapeno, habanero, that gives you the sensation that your tongue is burning. So capsaicin, this chemical, is the reason why when you eat like a spicy wing or a spicy pepper, you feel the burning sensation. Definitely one of my favorite chemicals. And there's 3 functional groups here. And I would love for you guys to tell me what they are. So the first functional group is here. Ooh, I heard somebody say alcohol. I think you're correct. The second functional group is here, and the third is here. And remember, like, if there's 2 functional groups next to each other, they are typically one thing. So somebody, I think I just heard somebody say in the chat, alcohol. I have Irene in the chat, Maria, Aman, so many people, Shabiba. Oh yeah, okay. So let's look at like I don't want to single anybody out, but some of you are perfectly correct and some of you are like partially correct. I love it that some people are saying alcohol and a couple people said amide. That's perfect. So let me get my pen here. So this is, of course, an alcohol. Anything that's just an OH is an alcohol. Now, in the chat, I think a few people might have said this isn't a ketone or something. This is an ether. Oops, sorry, my pen. You guys know my pen problems, or you'll learn to know my pen problems soon. I complain about it almost every day. An ether is when you have a carbon chain that has an oxygen in it. So that's an ether. And then a few people in the chat correctly called this an amide with a D. And you're correct if you said amide. If you said amine with an N, and I know this is crazy, right? Like, this sounds like an English course, a communications course where I'm worried about spelling. Typically, guys, I do not care about spelling. But if you call this an amine, I would have to take off marks because it's an amide. An amide is a chemical that has the nitrogen group next to a ketone. So you know, if you said amine, I'd probably give you half marks, which is, you know, still not bad. There's also in this, I'm going to pick another color here. There's also a benzene ring. It also has an alkene, but they're not really functional groups. They do determine the reactivity of this molecule, excuse me, but they don't really, they're not, you know, we don't consider them functional groups. Functional groups typically have oxygen, sulfur, or nitrogen. Okay, another one. Let me just check the chat before I do this. Yeah, Iman, you killed it. You got it completely right. Yasmin, alcohol, ether, amide. You got it right as well. So full marks. Okay, aspirin. You'll notice with aspirin, I have the A. Oops, sorry. A capitalized. This is a branded chemical, a chemical named by the pharmaceutical industry. It's a painkiller. Again, I'm not a biologist. I don't know how it works, especially with your body, I mean, but aspirin would be like, here you would call it like Panadol or something like that. Back home, we would call it aspirin. It's a painkiller. So if you have a headache or something, you would take this chemical. This has, let me see, this only has 2 functional groups. This is one of your functional groups on the top, and this is one of your functional groups on the bottom. Again, like I see so many students. I don't know why my pen isn't writing right now. There we go. I see so many students try to break these apart, and they'll say, oh, there's ketones and there's alcohols. But it's really important that you know if they're next to each other, they're one group. Like, think of the word group. Okay, so again, if you said on this ketone or alcohol, it is not correct because they are groups. So I have a lot of messages in the chat. I'm seeing carboxylic acid from like Shabiba and Aisha, Yasmin. That's perfect. And then Mohammed, you got this perfectly right. Carboxylic acid and ester, same as Aman. That's awesome. So these functional groups, I'll go back to my pen here. This is a carboxylic acid. Don't mind my pen work there. And this is an ester, not an ether. Very important to spell this correctly. Again, anybody who's had me before, I am not picky with spelling. This is chemistry. It's not English or communications. But if you said ether, I can't give you full marks because I can give you half a mark, but it's not an ether. It's what's called an ester. All right, one more, and then we'll look at the next. Oh, actually, wow. Oops, sorry, guys. I didn't mean to do that. We're actually done the unit here. I didn't expect that. So I'll show you one more. And I don't have unit 2 uploaded to your D2L. I didn't think we'd finish it today. So what I'll probably do is show you one more. And then I'll give you a brief outline of unit 2, and that'll be it for today. But let me share my screen again. Sorry, Zoom is good and Zoom is bad at the same time. Sometimes it's easy to use. So this example, again, I picked 4 chemicals that I personally have experience with or I personally know about. Vanillin. This is exactly what it sounds like. When you hear the word in English, vanillin, I hope your brain says, oh, vanilla, and you would be correct. This is the flavor compound. I think sometimes they call it a flavonoid, which is an interesting word. But this is the chemical in vanilla that you taste that tastes like vanilla. So if you got, a lot of baked goods has vanilla in it, and this is why. So similar to capsaicin, the chemical that makes your mouth feel warm or hot, this is what gives you that sweet, tasty vanilla taste. All right, so there's 3 functional groups here, and my chat is going crazy up there. So I assume people are giving me answers, but we have this guy, we have this guy, and we have this guy. So 3 functional groups. I got alcohol, that's correct. I have ether, that's correct. I have people, again, Aman, perfectly correct there. I'm hearing aldehyde. A few of you are saying ketone, and you're this question. This is a question I made for a reason. It's very easy to confuse a ketone and an aldehyde. A ketone is when the double bond is in the middle of a chain. So hold on, let me get my pen here. So a ketone is when the double bond O is in the middle. Well, and again, it doesn't, I don't mean perfectly in the middle. I just mean it's not on the first or last carbon. This, I'm going to put a star by this because this is definitely a question that a lot of students get confused with. This is an aldehyde. And it might be because of the way the chemical's drawn, but the reason I put this H here is because this is what we would say in chemistry, a terminal carbon. It's the last carbon. So whenever you see, a double bond O at the end of a chain, it's an aldehyde. And again, the H might be confusing. I really am not ever do I want to confuse you. Like, that's the last thing I want to do as a teacher. But the H is there to represent that there's no other carbons. This is like the end. So if you have a double bond O at the end, you have an aldehyde. And I mentioned to you guys the other day, and I'm just going to check this out. I feel that this comes from an Arabic word. Let me just see. I don't know if I'm going to find it. I don't know how good Google's going to be to me today. Yeah. I was just looking to see if I could figure out what type of Arabic word aldehyde came from, but I can't. But I'm pretty sure it comes from Arabic. I would be surprised if it didn't. Anyways, I'll look that up on my own time, and maybe next week when we have class. I guess we have class on Sunday afternoon. If I can find out where aldehyde came from, I'll let you know. Okay, so aldehyde. Let me get rid of some of this writing here, make it look a little cleaner for you. So aldehyde, people in the chat called this an ether, and people in the chat called this an alcohol. Perfect. That's it. That's your functional groups. A really good question in the chat. Again, if you guys aren't reading the chat, the question is, when you gave us the summary for the aldehyde, you didn't mention that the hydrogen is important. And that's correct. Like, there's 2 things I can mention. First of all, these molecules, I get these pictures online, so I don't make them. I mean, I have the computer program that I could make them, but when I made my notes, I downloaded them from Wiki or something like that. So I typically wouldn't put the hydrogen there. The hydrogen is not important. Okay, so we're talking about this hydrogen right here. The only reason that hydrogen is there is to show you that this is the end of the carbon chain. Again, in chemistry we call it the terminal carbon, but like the hydrogen isn't really important. All right, cool. Well, I don't think I'm really prepared for today, am I? Because oh, that's a good point in the chat there as well. So somebody, Iman said, because hyd comes from hydrogen, so that's a hint. That's a really good way to think about that. You know, aldehyde, you can think of the hydrogen here showing that is the end of the chain. I promise you guys, when you do your test with me or any labs that you have, there's not really any tricky questions, but watch out. Be very careful for the difference between a ketone and an aldehyde. And I guess, like, again, I can draw this. A ketone would look like this. An aldehyde would look like this. I do not know why chemists did that. It just seems mean, doesn't it? Like, they're so similar. Why couldn't they just call them all the same thing? But anyways, I didn't make the rules. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yeah, ask away.
So a ketone would be in the middle of another molecules or something. It would be in the middle. The
Yes.
oxygen would be in the middle.
Yep. So like when I say in the middle, I mean it's between two carbons. So like we could, let me clear my screen. I'll make a new screen. How do I do this? If we went back to chemistry 1120, which I'm sure all of you do not want to go back to, but if we went back to chemistry 1120 and we drew like Lewis dot diagrams, right? So like we're showing everything, every molecule. Sorry, let me fix that. A ketone is, oh my gosh, my pen is a double bonded oxygen inside the carbon chain. So it's not at the end. It has to be between two carbons. So this is a ketone. If I drew the same molecule, you can see why I do not like drawing this type of formula, because it just takes so much time. This would be your structural formula. It just takes forever. A ketone is on the top, and an aldehyde is on the bottom. And the only difference is that the aldehyde, the double bond O, is at the end or the beginning. Like it needs to be at the end or the beginning of the carbon chain. And I know that's confusing. Like, again, I cannot stress enough, I do not know why chemists name them different, other than the fact that they probably react very different. But yeah, that's a ketone. That the double bond O needs to be inside of the chain, and aldehyde needs to be on the outside of the chain.
Sir,
Yes, question?
how can I know the difference between amines and amides? They both have NF2.
Okay, another good question. All right, you guys are helping me out because I'm not prepared for the next unit, and you're giving me a million questions. So this is really good for me. So the question was, how do you know the difference between an amine or an amine? I think the British might say amine, and an amide. So amine versus amide. amide? Okay, good question. Now, this is easier, in my opinion, than ketone and aldehyde. An amine is any carbon chain that just has a nitrogen on it. So these are amines. You can ignore the hydrogens. The only reason I'm putting the hydrogens there are to kind of balance the functional group. So any compound with just, or I shouldn't say compound, but any carbon with just one nitrogen bonded to it is an amine. An amide is very similar.
With the carbonyl group.
Oh my gosh, you just made my day. You made that made my weekend. You don't understand. Yes, like I'm so happy that you called it a carbonyl group as well. An amide is something that has a carbonyl group, which in simple terms is this double bond O. That's so good to hear. Literally made my weekend. So when you see a nitrogen next to a double bonded O, it's an amide. That's perfect. Oh, you guys, I'm gonna have a good semester with you guys, I think. Okay, so what is it? It's 12:12. I'm gonna basically stop here, but I do want to give you an introduction to one of the longer units, and we're gonna do this on Sunday. And I have arguably good news or bad news. What I mean by that is the next chapter, which I'm about to share, just give me a minute, is very mathematically heavy. So if you love mathematics, you are going to like chapter 2. If you hate mathematics, you might want to wait until chapter 3, and then you might like chemistry again. So chapter 2, give me a second to share this. I personally love math, and I love chemistry that has math. Anytime there's math in chemistry means I don't have to memorize something. I can use a formula and answer a question. So this is probably one of my favorite units in all of chemistry. And for anybody in this class who likes to cook or bake, this is an amazing unit. Thermochemistry, which is the unit we're going to start on Sunday. This will take us a few weeks. This is a pretty big unit. This is the unit that's all about heat, right? Think of the word thermo, right? You might think of thermometer. So it's like heat and then chemistry. So if you like to cook or bake, this is the chapter for you. The only problem is this chapter is a lot of math. So I hope you guys are comfortable with a little bit of math. Oh, I wish. Iman mentioned, can we leave this chapter for the end? The last chapter, and this is an interesting thing as well. This chapter is called thermochemistry. The last chapter is called electrochemistry. So you can just imagine what that's about. This is about heat. The last chapter is about electricity, and really cool chapters. And I'm sorry, Harold, we can't do 1 + 1 in this one. And Abdul Halim says, wake me up when chapter 2 ends. I'm sorry. It's not that crazy. Like I teach math at the college, or I've taught math before. It's not as scary as you think it is when it comes to math. So I didn't mean to scare you away, but there is a little bit of math here, especially at the end. But don't worry. It's not as like there's no logarithms or exponents or anything like that. No calculus. It's pretty straightforward, but yeah, there are some calculations. But next week, I'll leave it here for today. But next week, I'd be interested to know on Sunday. Oh, I got some good comments in the chat there from Harold and Yasmin. Thank you for trusting me. That's dangerous, but thank you. And for Maria, it's not organic chemistry. This is what we would call physical chemistry. We cannot Thanos snap, unfortunately, this chapter, but you don't have to answer this today. But on Sunday, I'd be interested to know how many of you in this class like to cook or bake, spend time in the kitchen. And don't answer that today. Don't write that in the chat. But next week on Sunday, I'll be interested to know how many of you like to spend time in the kitchen, because without thermochemistry, we couldn't eat meat. So it's a really cool chapter. All right. Oh gosh, Harold, I think you bake a bit too long. Before I leave you all, there's one last very good question in the chat from Aman. The question is, will the tests be on campus? So you guys have 2 tests this semester, and each test as of now, again, like this could change with COVID, but as of right now, your tests are on campus. So you guys will get to see me and meet me, and I'll be in your classroom with you. You won't have a test until February, so don't worry about your test for now. But this is a good way to end class. Absolutely 100% right now, your tests are on campus. So I'll let you know more about that at the end of the month. Again, you won't have a test until February. And there's 2 tests. Okay, and they're worth a lot, so they're very important. So yeah, no Google, unfortunately, no Google for these tests. It's a little different in this course than Chemistry 1120, but I promise you, I've taught this course probably 50 times. I'm not even joking. This is not a hard course. You guys will be fine. You'll all do fine. This is a good, fun course. Okay, so guys, I'm gonna go. You guys can take a break. Have a good weekend. Be safe, wear a mask, and I'll have a nice day, and I'll see you on Sunday. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Mark.
Have a great weekend.
Thank
Yes.
See you.
See you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a nice weekend.
Yes, you too.
Enjoy your weekend, sir.
You too. Bye. I'll miss you.
Bye.
See you later.
Have a nice weekend too.
You too. Thank you so much. Goodbye. I'll see you later.